topic that's on the minds of farmers across the Midwest. It's a little bit unique that we're seeing so many stressors early on. I can remember wearing a stocking hat on Memorial Day. Just last weekend I was setting up extra water stations for my cattle. Certainly the gamut of stressors. Phil, can you talk about kind of how that's affecting our plants this early in the season?
Sure. Yeah, it seems like, I mean, this corn actually looks pretty nice, V8, at least a solid V8 corn. I mean, but what we're seeing in a lot of cases is leaf rolling already. This early in the season, like you mentioned, is a little unnerving. It's just something we don't typically see. So, we talked the last couple of weeks, we've talked about this important, crucial time period of developing that, determining the girth of the ear of corn. So we've just kind of made it through that. Depending where you're at, that's typically V5 to V7, talking about the growing point coming above ground. We're at that point now too. So the corn plant really is just getting past that time frame, but this is a rough time to be under stress. So we have a lot of corn spraying just finishing up or finished up in many cases, which obviously puts some stress on it. We just got a lot of cornfields out of frost damage, obviously, which set them back a little bit. In a lot of cases, didn't pay to replant just because you set it back even further in terms of where the corn plant's actually at in development. And in a lot of those cases, they came out of it really well, but it's still a stress. Anything that causes stress at this point in the season is going to kind of affect that all the way through. Corn is not quite as forgiving as soybeans. When you start stressing it early on, it's going to remember it. It's going to, every phase of yield development, it's going to impact it. So we're at that early stage, and we're just finishing developing that girth. So just think about that. If you're at that V5, V7 time period, and you're seeing leaf rolling, that's going to be impacting. That corn plant knows, okay, I'm stressed now. I'm not going to be able to produce all those potential kernels. So it's going to reduce that girth, whether it's 16 to 14 or 18 to 14. Hopefully not, but in any case, if you're still trying to develop that girth of that ear, it's going to reduce that if you're seeing leaf rolling, especially early in the day. I know a lot of cases we're seeing leaf rolling 4 or 5 in the afternoon now. It seems to be creeping up every day as we keep getting the higher temps and drier air. But just very concerning seeing it this early in the season with all the things we got going on, and even seeing some other nutrient deficiencies. In early season, we've seen uneven emergence and things like that. Just not what you want to see. You want to see a nice, even, uniform field of corn. The plants are all competing uniformly with each other, and closing the row is the biggest thing right now from what we're not seeing in a lot of cases. If that row's not closed, every day that it's not closed, we're losing moisture, and precious moisture at this point, not having that row closed up. And as the leaves curl up and roll up, obviously they lose that leaf area, and the row opens back up to lose even more from evaporation.
Okay, so you kind of mentioned it before. It's not uncommon to have some of those drier conditions later on in the season, but this year we're kind of setting up for almost a double whammy potentially.
Yeah, exactly. So as we get closer and closer to pollination, that's really the key time. We talk about this a lot, but having stressed corn plants going into pollination is not a good thing. So what we're looking for, unfortunately, I don't want to scare too many people, but we got to talk about all the potential avenues here. So getting closer to that pollination window every day, we're kind of looking at really a 4-week window around pollination. So that's that week of silking that your corn plant is trying to throw silks out is crucially important. But the 2 weeks leading up to it and the 2 weeks after are also really, really important in the corn really reproduction life cycle and determining yield, because it's finishing those 2 weeks up to that silking period. It's finishing filling out that potential kernels in length, so the number of potential kernels and how long that ear is going to be. It's developing that, and then after it silks, it starts pollination and so forth. It's gearing up towards how many can it fill. Is it going to start aborting kernels? What's the case? What's going to happen? I mean, a lot of people have seen those zippered ears or uneven, pollination ears where you see just a kernel here and a kernel there. Obviously we're not to that point yet, but that's the potential. If we come up to that window and we're still under severe stress and the corn's rolling and everything, that's the potential issues that we're going to be facing. But from what I've seen, it seems to me like there's going to be a double whammy just because we're so short on moisture. I've been talking to a lot of farmers about side dressing options and maybe how much to side dress depending on what you have down. This is probably a year where it was good to have some in-furrow stuff down, some starter down already, because the corn plants used that early season and got them going much better. The fields that struggled, have more residue, maybe didn't have enough down close to the roots, have struggled a little bit more. So I think in a lot of cases, that if we don't get that moisture, that extra nitrogen we put out there may not be utilized. We got to remember that. We put a lot of nitrogen out some years, but the efficiency of that, getting it to the plant, it needs moisture. That nitrogen essentially moves by mass flow to the roots, which means it moves with the water. There's no other way of saying it. If you don't have water, it's not going to make it to the roots to get into the plant. So I just think there's a lot of little things adding up, when it comes to agronomics of the plant and just in general. Every year we deal with Mother Nature. There's lots of little factors that add up, and when we get stressed corn plants, we get lots of other things adding on, especially insects and other pests. They take advantage of the plant when it's weak and down, so I know we're probably going to be talking about that in a few weeks. As the plants get stressed, those insects, it's like a little beacon they send out. It's a stressed corn plant, and those insects unfortunately go towards that. So just a lot of things to keep in mind if we keep going down this avenue where we're continually being stressed up to pollination.
Okay, good tips. Reasons to be diligent about continuing to scout throughout the summer. I think it's kind of amazing how corn plants do make those compensations though. Short on moisture now, they're adjusting to keep that plant alive. So yeah, we need moisture, but that Mother Nature is doing its job in adjusting for what we have now and preparing for what might be coming. So is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with though as we think about a short moisture growing season and going forward?
Yeah, so just some general rules of thumbs, when we talk about yield, it's the toughest part. Being an agronomist, I hate that, trying to say, oh, you're going to lose this much yield. There's no perfect rule. And honestly, I hope that this goes out the window and we get moisture in the next week or two. But, from what the research shows, the general rule of thumb is we lose about 1% for every 12 hours that the leaves are rolled up to pollination. So 1% of yield, 1% yield decrease for every 12 hours that the leaves are rolled. Once we get into that window I was talking about, that 4-week, especially right around when the silks are trying to come out, that's closer to 1% for every 4 hours the leaves are rolled. So you can lose 6-8% pretty easily per day when we get into that pollination window, especially like I mentioned, if we get up to silking. We talk about this a lot too, but if we miss that when we get to pollination and there's severe stress and hot temperatures, the thing that struggles is those silks. That's a lot of water in those silks, and what happens is that gets pushed back. And we've got drought guard hybrids and other hybrids that are more tolerant of that. They prioritize that water a little better, but most typical hybrids, especially ones that are meant more for yield, they sometimes sacrifice in getting that silk out. So we can have basically a miss in that pollination window. So the pollen's flying, but the silks aren't out of the ear yet. And that's when we end up seeing all these kind of goofy ears and so forth. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but that's what we're going to be watching when we're coming into that pollination window. But just kind of remember that general rule of thumb: the longer you see the corn plants curled up, earlier in the day, if you start to see them curl early in the day, that's definitely not a good sign. They're staying curled up for a long period of time. So, we've got some ways to get around that. Obviously, if you have a drought guard hybrid out there, that is going to help you a little bit. They do better resourcing of that water and kind of slow that use down. Don't transpire and lose as much throughout the day to keep themselves cool. But like you said, corn plants are an amazing thing. They do a lot of different things to adjust. But we also have modern corn hybrids that try to yield a lot too, and it requires a lot of moisture. And if we're not getting moisture early on, that makes it tough for getting that yield at the end of the season and filling those kernels out. So, unfortunately, typically when we get dry conditions, we also get heat. They just go hand in hand. And hopefully, maybe we have the heat now and don't have it as much at pollination.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping that's the case, but typically that's what happens. We get heat and limited moisture, and they go hand in hand and really stress the plant out. I mean, a corn plant can handle 90+ degrees pretty easily if it's got moisture to work with. But without moisture, it takes a lot to keep that plant cool, and it loses a lot to do that and keep itself cool. So.
Okay, great rules of thumb, things to think about, continue scouting. Let's all pray for rain too. That's going to be the name of the game the rest of the season here. So thank you everyone for tuning in. If you have additional questions, always send them to us on social media. We monitor that for topics each week. So if you've got a question on your mind, shoot it our way. We'll be back next week with another Ask the Agronomist.